Topping the news, disputed results in Panama's presidential elections. Secretary of State Baker opens talks in Moscow, and Los Angeles teachers threaten to strike. In sports, the Flyers stay alive in the hockey playoffs, and it will be a beautiful day in the Plains, soggy in the east.
This is NBC News at Sunrise with Deborah Norville.
Deborah Norville is off today. I'm Mary Alice Williams. In Panama this morning, more troops have been brought in to guard the vote counting after the first official results were greeted with more charges of fraud. As NBC's Ed Rabel reports, perhaps the only way out of the country's crisis is to declare the election invalid and start all over again.
The official tally showed the pro-Noriega candidate leading by 2-1, despite evidence gathered by independent observers that voters overwhelmingly cast their ballots for the opposition candidate. The government is said to fear rioting when more of the official results are announced. To solve the crisis, Noriega opponents say the government should simply declare their man, Guillermo Endara, the winner.
That's right. I'm acting as president-elect.
Another way to end the crisis, politicians say, is to have the election declared invalid. Both the opposition and the government are said to be considering the plan. To make it work, however, the opposition is believed to be demanding that new elections be held within 6 months and that the government must provide specific guarantees that there would be no fraud. Ed Rabel, NBC News, Panama.
The Bush administration is waiting for the final election results before it decides what, if anything, it'll do in response to the Panamanian elections. While the president won't rule it out, sources say unilateral military action against Panama is very unlikely. But one option may be to increase U.S. military strength in the Canal Zone. Another response reportedly being considered is to increase economic sanctions. In Moscow this morning, Secretary of State James Baker is meeting with his Soviet counterpart, Foreign Minister Shevardnadze. While Baker says he wants to test the Kremlin's commitment to reform, the Soviets are anxious to resume the arms talks. And as NBC's Bob Abernethy reports, there may be something for both sides by the time Baker's two-day visit is over.
Secretary Baker is here for the first full-scale U.S.-Soviet talks since the Bush administration began. The Soviets have been increasingly critical of what they call the slow pace of the U.S. policy review. So at the top of the Soviet agenda is getting negotiations going again, especially on arms control. As Secretary Baker met Foreign Minister Edward Shevardnadze, the two men were expected to agree on a date for restarting strategic arms talks, perhaps next month.
So you look forward to good results, Mr. Secretary?
Yes.
Shevardnadze and Baker also were expected to spend time on such regional issues as the Middle East, where the U.S. is now said to want Soviet help to get peace talks going. Tomorrow, Baker meets Mikhail Gorbachev, but U.S. officials have played down the likelihood of an early date for a Bush-Gorbachev summit. Bob Abernethy, NBC News, Moscow.
In this country, House Speaker Jim Wright has launched a spirited defense against 69 charges of congressional misconduct. Yesterday, Wright's lawyers asked for access to committee documents and witnesses, and today they're expected to ask that many of the major charges against the Speaker be dropped. The Ethics Committee will meet this afternoon to consider the motions, but a ruling today is not considered likely. This could be the last week of classes for Los Angeles City schools for a long time. Teachers there say they'll strike on Monday unless they get a 21% raise. As of now, there are no new talks scheduled, and as Pat Silva of KNBC reports, preparations are well underway for the first school strike in Los Angeles in 19 years.
Thousands of strike posters rolled off the presses at the United Teachers of Los Angeles headquarters. They'll be used next week if teachers carry out their threatened walkout.
So if we don't have a settlement, we will have a strike in the city on Monday, May the 15th.
UTLA President Wayne Johnson said the strike date, originally set for May 30th, was moved up after Superintendent of Schools Leonard Britton threatened to withhold May paychecks if grade books weren't turned in by Monday. The teachers plan to take the records with them, jeopardizing final grades and graduation ceremonies as a bargaining tool in their bitter 16-month-old contract dispute.
The substitutes who will be here for 6 weeks if the strike lasts that long are going to be giving us our grades, so our final transcripts won't be accurate, and those are what we have to send to the colleges, so it's kind of scary.
Johnson said if the teachers walk out on Monday, it could be a longer and more bitter strike than the one in 1970 that lasted 23 days. In Los Angeles, Pat DeSilva for NBC News.
And finally, 70 years ago today, just as World War I was ending and Prohibition was about to begin, Hostess introduced its first cupcake. The 1919 version didn't look much like the ones you can buy today. It was always made of devil's food cake, but it didn't have a cream filling or the trademark loop-de-loop icing on the top. Those little touches didn't come till the late 40s. We thought you'd want to know that. In sports, the Flyers win in overtime to stay alive in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Don Criqui has that and a night of upsets in the NBA when we come back.
Before I started wearing no nonsense, I used to have more nail polish on my pantyhose than on my fingernails. Looks better here, doesn't it?
Pantyhose at last are no nonsense.
You're on your way.
The company that gave me a summer job in Louisiana last year has sent me to Germany this year. And we've got an interesting challenge, getting a special product to people who need it all over the world. It's used in formulating medical compounds that fight heart disease, high blood pressure, and more. Hard to imagine a college senior working on a project like this. But I found one company willing to give a young person a chance.
I'll let you do great things.
Some drinks have a dark side, a taste that may leave you thirsty. But all-natural Sundance is just fruit juices and sparkling water. No added sugar, no dark side. Sundance puts refreshment in a whole new light.
An overtime goal in the Stanley Cup and some razzle-dazzle in baseball. Don Criqui's here with the sports. Don.
We have all that, Mary Alice. One of the Stanley Cup finalists could be determined tonight when the Calgary Flames host the Chicago Blackhawks. The Flames lead their semifinal series 3-1. Last night in Montreal, the Philadelphia Flyers stayed alive, beating the Canadiens 2-1 on an overtime goal by Dave Poulin. Montreal now leads the series 3-2 with Game 6 tomorrow night in Philadelphia. In the NBA playoffs, Michael Jordan continued his postseason heroics. Air Jordan took off in overtime, scoring 9 points in OT to lead Chicago past New York 120-109 in the opening game of their Eastern Conference semifinals. Jordan finished with 34 points, 10 rebounds, and 12 assists. Meanwhile, in Phoenix, Chris Mullin scored 37 points to help Golden State even their Western Conference semifinal with a victory over the Suns. Baseball Commissioner Bart Giamatti has been presented with the report of a special investigation into Pete Rose's alleged gambling activities. A hearing will probably be scheduled after Rose's attorneys receive a copy of the report. One of baseball's most impressive streaks has come to an end. It happened in the ninth inning last night in Cincinnati. Met shortstop Kevin Elster misplayed a grounder, ending his record of 88 straight games without an error. In other action, Atlanta made it 6 wins in a row. The Mets beat Cincinnati in that game. The Giants took Chicago, and San Diego defeated St. Louis. Los Angeles at Pittsburgh was rained out. In the American League, Cy Young Award winner Frank Viola finally won a game. The Minnesota left-hander entered last night's game at Boston with a record of 0-5. And when it was over, Viola and the Twins had a 6-2 victory. Toronto's Nilson Liriano turned in a sparkling defensive play last night. Here he robs Harold Reynolds of the Mariners, but it wasn't enough to prevent the Blue Jays' 4-3 loss. In other action, the Angels won their 6th game in a row. The White Sox blasted Milwaukee, Kansas City took Cleveland, and the Yankees beat Texas at Yankee Stadium, which is where we find our catch of the night. Watch Yankee center fielder Roberto Kelly go over the wall to rob Pete Incaviglia of the Rangers. Earlier in the season, Kelly tried to make the same catch, but the ball bounced off his glove and over the fence for a homer. This time he got it right. And that's sports.
Okay, thank you, Don. Sun in the plains, drought relief in the east. Joe Woody's weather is next on NBC News at sunrise.
If I were going to create the perfect place, I'd start with the north. I would carve out rivers and rolling hills, then ride the moon south and warm the skies with a tropical sun. I would dot the west with little hometowns and fill the east with excitement. Right in the middle, I'd put a great big playground. I would surround it all with water from coast to coast to coast. and I'd give it a name. Florida.
Have you ever wondered what a baggage handler might take on vacation? What everyone should take. Samsonite's glutton for punishment.
For post-natural bran flakes, John Newcomb on getting the best out of life.
Staying on top requires a good serve, strong approach, and a great put away.
Reach for the best-tasting high-fiber bran flake. Post bran flakes at their best.
America's national forests are really wonderful places to get away to get a little elbow room when the city starts squeezing you in. Why not come and see the miracle for yourself? Get involved with Forests for Us.
We'd be glad to have you.
Used to be, the questions asked in this room were about spelling and geography. Today, the questions are a lot tougher. Jimmy, where did you get those bruises? Johnny, are you high on something? Mary, are you pregnant? There's a lot more to teaching today than the 3 R's. And the more you know how complex and difficult teaching has become, the more you know that teachers deserve all the respect and support we can give them.
Big news in the Frisbee world this morning. There's a new record for Frisbee tossing. Not for distance, but for time. The competition in Hartford, Connecticut was all for charity. The tossers were allowed a 5-minute break every hour, but they had to fling the Frisbee for 22 out of every 24 hours, every 30 seconds. Think about it. Ford Trinity College fraternity brothers own the new record, 118 hours, 36 minutes. Tough on your throwing arm.
Oh, yes, indeed. Reminds me of some of my graduate school days. We used to toss the Frisbee around a little bit. That time away.
I was never good at it, though.
You weren't? It's just it's a little touch of the wrist.
Yes, I know.
Meanwhile.
That's why I can't play golf. This is Joe.
All right,
He
good
has
morning.
The weather.
Yes, indeed. We talk about the weather here a little bit. A stormy day for the east. Woo, and the Rio Grande and parts of the west. Storm clouds are building over the east, as you can see in the time-lapse action, and they're going to stick around for quite a while. The time-lapse showing a huge swirl beginning to develop right over the northeast, the mid-Atlantic, the northeast, going to be soaking for the next 4 to 5 days. Lots of clouds, periods of rain, and we have flash flood watches up for a good part of the northeast, and we'll have more as the week progresses. Meanwhile, down over the Rio Grande, some thunderstorms will develop as moisture pumps in from the Gulf of Mexico off to the west, so watch for some flash flooding there, some local heavy downpours. And another spot to watch, the northern Rocky Mountains and parts of the Plateau region. Say Salt Lake City, could be airport delays there because of strong thunderstorms, Billings, Montana, northern Rockies, and even some scattered showers for parts of central and northern California. The best place to be today, the Great Plains and the Midwest. Beautiful blue skies, lots of sunshine, and with that sunshine, some comfortable temperatures in the 70s, even the 80s in parts of Montana on the eastern sections there. Now, for Phoenix, not quite as hot as it has been. It's been above 100 today in the 90s. The northwest, under those clouds, kind of cool, in the 50s. And for the northeast, with thick clouds overhead and rain falling heavy at times, it will only be in the 50s, about 15 degrees cooler than normal. Down south, Miami's high, 86 degrees. Atlanta, 72. A chance of thunderstorms for Atlanta as that frontal system pushes towards the southeast coast. And watch for some strong thunderstorms for the coastal sections of the Carolinas. That's my national weather forecast. Now here's what's happening in your neighborhood. For Chicago, beautiful, 62 degrees. Minneapolis-St. Paul, very nice at 76. LA's high only 68 degrees today. San Francisco going up to 63. So enjoy those sunny skies in the Midwest today. Mary Alice.
Don't you wish you were there?
I do, I do.
The news continues in just a moment. You're watching NBC News at Sunrise.
I'm Bryant Gumbel. Later this morning on Today, parenting from the father's perspective.
I'm Jane Pauley. Also, Jim Fowler looks at exotic animals, and John Provost from Lassie.
Later this morning on Today.
Attention qualified landowners. If you've ever wanted a new home you could be confident and proud of, B&M Home Builders can help. B&M can construct you a new home with zero down and financing available. B&M will complete your new home to 100% satisfaction. So remember, if you've always wanted that new home, call B&M Home Builders at these two locations. In Tupelo, call 844-3210, and in Grenada, 226-5116.
Guatemala is calm after another failed coup attempt, and new tests on a drug for wrinkles gives promising results. In business news, Pan Am may try to merge with the parent of Northwest Airlines. Details in a couple of minutes. The lottery is invading still another part of American life. 20,000 people from around the world who'd like visas to live in the United States will be chosen by lottery. More than 3 million people have applied for the visas. The winners will be picked by a computer, and they could eventually apply for citizenship if they qualify. Choosing the right doctor is a matter of great importance to many Americans, and especially to those who don't have a physician they see on a regular basis. How do people find a doctor they can go to with confidence, whose professional standing and experience ensure the best possible care? This morning on America's Vital Signs, Roger O'Neill reports on a new approach born of frustration and anxiety.
There's any potatoes in those ears. Let's see, I see one.
Finding good medical care has usually been a chancy affair. Americans see a doctor or dentist 1 billion times a year. One medical journal found 64% are not satisfied with their doctor. Some are even disgusted.
Most doctors just want to get you in and get you out so they can get another patient in there. And they really don't give a damn about whether they help you or not.
We don't know where to go to find a doctor. We don't know what questions to ask. And we certainly don't know who to trust.
Joe Tallman lost trust in doctors when his daughter Jessica developed brain seizures. In 2 years, the little girl saw 15 doctors. Some wanted to remove half of her brain. Finally, she was cured with medicine. Tallman knew there had to be a better way to find a doctor than relying on friends or the yellow pages.
Prolog, this is Jerry. May I help you find a doctor?
Yes.
Tallman now runs a company which tries to match patients with doctors.
I'm looking for a family doctor with very good bedside manners.
Let me pull up the doctor's bio here, give you some personal information on the practice.
Consumers can find out about a doctor's education, his religion, hobbies, office hours, and what he charges. Comments from patients who have already seen the doctor are also available through the service.
You can ask them questions that you would not go into a doctor's office and ask the doctor face-to-face for fear of either offending him or looking stupid.
They already have some good substantial information about me and the way I practice medicine before they even meet me. Whoa, what's that?
Doctors or hospitals sponsoring them pay a $35 to $100 fee for each new patient. There is no charge to consumers. Some hospitals, like this one, offer their own referral service, but listings are limited to staff physicians. Prolog operates in 8 cities and has files on 8,200 doctors.
But it is not a guarantee to good health care. The company gets all of its information from doctors, and it relies on their integrity for accuracy. Doctors can lie. One physician said he had never been convicted of malpractice when in fact he had. That doctor has now been removed from the list. But 95% of the people who called the company say they are happy with the doctor they visited. Prolog has successfully tapped the market, helping people choose a doctor.
Okay, guys.
Where in the past, there was little opportunity to make an informed choice. Roger O'Neill, NBC News, Boulder, Colorado.
More news, the weather, and the business report when we come back. Our top story this morning, the wait for General Noriega in Panama. President Bush says he'll decide whether to take action against Panama after Noriega speaks out on the election results. Backers of Noriega say his presidential candidate is comfortably ahead so far, despite 2 independent polls that say the opposition is a clear-cut winner. President Bush says the Noriega candidate lost, but he wants to hear the general describe the results. The results of a coup attempt in Guatemala are clear this morning. The 3-year-old civilian government put down the second attempted coup in a year without firing a shot. Rebel troops blocked 2 major highways near the capital, but they turned back when faced with a larger force of loyalist troops. There's promising news this morning about a drug that fights Father Time and the wrinkles he causes. The latest research indicates the prescription drug Retin A does work over longer testing periods than were available before. It seems to smooth wrinkles the first 10 months of use and then prevent them from returning. The chief researcher says the drug also seems to work on certain cancers.
The Retin A actually improved certain lesions which are known to be precursors to skin cancers. In other words, in this particular setting in man, it appears that the drug prevents the formation of skin cancer and does not cause skin cancer.
Now, one test did show Retin A can accelerate cancer formation in mice, but there's no sign of the same danger in humans. The state of Vermont is leading the way in fighting what's believed to be the largest source of ozone depletion in the United States. The state legislature has passed, and the governor is expected to sign the first bill barring auto air conditioners that use chlorofluorocarbons. The law would take effect with the 1993 model year. The ozone layer protects the Earth from harmful ultraviolet radiation. In business news this morning, Pan Am is considering making a bid for NWA, the parent of Northwest Airlines. Among others in the potential investment group are 2 of the Bass brothers of Texas. Some analysts say the possible bid is wishful thinking by Pan Am, but others say the merger makes sense for both Pan Am and NWA. The stock market recorded its 8th loss in a row as bond prices plunged. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 5 points to close at 2,371.33. Standard & Poor's 500 stock index dropped less than a point to 305.19. The Shearson-Lehman long-term Treasury bond index was lower, but in London this morning, U.S. long bonds were higher than yesterday's close in New York. Looking ahead to today's market day, here's the Wall Street Journal's Tom Herman. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Mary
What
Alice.
is moving the market along this roller coaster, all the markets?
Mainly interest rates, which have been going up all week. The big problem is all this borrowing the government is doing. They have to borrow nearly $29 billion this week, and that's been driving rates back up.
What's coming today that would drive interest rates further?
Today, the Treasury has to sell 10-year notes. A lot of people I just spoke to in London are afraid that investors don't want to buy 10-year notes. The interest rate is only going to be about 9% or a little bit higher. A lot of investors say, why buy 10-year notes? I can get the same return on 6-month Treasury bills.
Are the economic indicators expected out this week likely to be good news or bad news?
Probably bad news, and that's another reason why people are afraid of higher interest rates. We're going to have retail sales tomorrow. That's expected to show strong growth, and therefore people will worry about inflation. And then on Friday, the producer price report, which is expected to show sharply higher inflation.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Tom Herman of the Wall Street Journal. The dollar lost ground in early European trading. It's down against the Japanese yen, off against the West German mark, and also lower against the British pound. The price of gold at 9 a.m. in London was $378 an ounce. That's down 80 cents from yesterday's close in New York. Alan Abelson is next with a look at the financial mess in Argentina after this.
Who could ask for anything more?
Ask him if it has a 5-speed transmission like Isuzu.
Does it have a 5-speed transmission?
Well, I'm going to check on that. Ask him if it has a bigger payload than Isuzu.
Ignore him?
Or better mileage.
Does it? Not exactly.
No! Ask him why it costs hundreds more than Isuzu.
Now you can save up to $1,000 on the Isuzu pickup during Isuzu's 75th birthday blowout.
Tropicana Pure Premium Orange Juice has only one ingredient, so no other major brand comes closer to this than this. Now, what are you waiting for? Try it. Oh yes, there is one other thing. Pure Premium now comes in a slightly larger package. 96 ounces, to be exact.
Mornings are always crazy in my house. Somehow, I make it to breakfast. Today, Mom is putting potatoes in the toaster, or Wright toaster hash browns. Now I can have real potatoes for breakfast. and still make the school bus on time.
I believe in pantyhose I can count on. You know, like 5 wearings, 6 wearings.
Pantyhose that last are no nonsense.
Of all the threats to stability in South America, perhaps the most pernicious is its economy. Argentina has labored under inflation and interest rates so staggering neither the International Monetary Fund nor the World Bank will help, and their coffers of foreign money are empty. Alan Abelson has some thoughts on that. Good morning, Alan.
Good morning, Mary Alice.
Fundamentals. How did Argentina get here?
Well, I think they had a bunch of generals and admirals who weren't very good at fighting wars, but they were even worse at governing a country. And what they did basically was they imported a lot of money. They borrowed and borrowed and borrowed, hundreds of, well, altogether they owe about $70 billion to the rest of the world. And that money, instead of going into something productive, like, let's say, a new plant of some sort or another, actually went for consumer goods. It kept the population happy, but it also laid the seeds, it seems to me, of what we're seeing now, which is the most disrupted economy in the world.
Elections coming up next week.
That's right.
The Peronists seem to have the upper hand at this point. They're right-wing. Well, what will they do fiscally?
Well, they're right-wing, but they're populist. And a part of Argentina's present trouble goes back to Perón, because he did everything pretty much to keep in power. And, bread and circuses were his business, and that's exactly what these guys will do, too. They'll make a bad situation impossible.
What would the next government have to do to get back in the good graces of the IMF and the World Bank?
Well, they'd have to really face their problems, and it's a very ugly kind of thing to have to do. What they'd have to do, for instance, is probably fire about 1/4 to 1/3 of the government workers. They're overloaded with people on the payroll. They'd have to get rid of all the state-owned losing businesses. They'd have to settle down and try and really get their export business going again. This is an extraordinarily rich country, but for some reason, as we've talked about, the country has really, just gone to the dogs.
If they don't do it, is that country ripe for revolution?
Oh, I'm sure that you'll have all kinds of trouble in Argentina if they don't do it. You'll have food riots. You'll have all kinds of economic problems. You can't just keep borrowing and having a good time, unfortunately. I wish you could, but you can't. And I think Argentina's got to pay the price.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. Alan Abelson. Travelers in this country are in for tough transit today. Joe Whitty has his umbrella out.
That's right. Umbrella and everything else. Foul weather gear. It's beautiful for the Midwest. Plenty of sunny blue skies, but the east and the west will indeed be wet. Take a look at the West Coast satellite photograph. You see some clouds moving on shore, and later on today we'll have a chance of some strong thunderstorms over parts of the northern Rocky Mountain states. Now for the East Coast, we're going to have a system locking in for the next 4 to 5 days, and there's the beginning of it right there. Cloudy skies, rain spreading up the mid-Atlantic into southern New England at this hour. Rain will be heavy at times. We'll have flood watches up for much of the mid-Atlantic area, and it's going to just continue to rain and rain and more rain. Flood watches, stalled system means we're going to have 3 to 5 inches over the next couple of days in total for around all the way from Boston down to the northeast. Good news, of course, for the reservoirs for New York City, which are very low. They need a boost in rain, but flood watches will be posted, and strong winds will cause some beach erosion during the course of the day. That's it. Mary Alice?
Thank you, Joe. And that's NBC News at Sunrise this Wednesday morning. I'm Mary Alice Williams. Bye-bye.